The biggest story this year was a historic impeachment, that of US President Donald Trump. In fact, the year 2019 began with a duel as the newly elected Speaker of the US House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, challenged President Donald Trump amid a government shutdown. Amid a Mueller report, impeachment of Donald Trump began as a possibility, and then Donald Trump's efforts to pressure Ukraine into investigating a Democratic rival this year led to the third impeachment of a US president in history. Just shy of the third anniversary of his presidency, Donald Trump was impeached in a mostly party-line vote in the House of Representatives. However, to convict and remove Trump from office, two-thirds majority vote in the Republican-controlled Senate would be required, and with no Republican senators currently voicing support for impeachment, Trump appears safe to survive. However, with the US presidential election slated in 2020, it will be interesting to see how impeachment will impact the polls. While the impeachment story grabbed headlines, the year 2019 witnessed Donald Trump changing several US policies that impacted the world. Throughout 2019, the issue of immigration continued to dominate the US political debate as the Trump administration instituted a slew of changes to the country's policies. From proposals to limit illegal immigration to ramping up plans to build a wall on the US-Mexico border, Trump radically altered the way the country deals with immigration. Trump also withdrew from several accords like the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, Paris Climate Accord, and showed his disdain towards global organizations like the WTO. Here is a look at some of the key foreign policy decisions of US President Donald Trump in 2019. The year started with US President Donald Trump emphasizing on withdrawing American troops from Syria. US support to the Syrian Democratic Forces has long angered Turkey, which views the Kurdish-led group as a terrorist threat. However, in appeasing Ankara, America angered local Kurds, who have been playing a key role in helping US fight against Islamic State terrorist organization. In October, Turkish President Recep Erdogan repeated his long-time threat to launch a cross-border invasion into Syria. This time, Donald Trump capitulated, moving a handful of US troops so that Turkey could begin the assault against the Kurds. For the second time, Trump's advisors urged the president to reverse course. He eventually did so, ordering roughly 600 troops to stay in their Deir ez-Zor region to guard the area's rich oil reserves and continue fighting Islamic State. Then there was some triumph for United States. Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed in a US raid last month, decapitating the group. The region has stabilized, but at a great humanitarian cost. Hundreds have been killed and roughly 2 lakh people have been displaced. The historic nuclear talks between Trump and North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un in 2018 offered hope that the two countries could de-escalate tensions and prevent a nuclear confrontation. However, talks stalled after the Singapore summit in June 2018. While both sides made significant verbal commitments in 2019, the year saw a gradual deterioration of bilateral ties. Pyongyang accused Washington of failing to fulfill its commitment to ease economic sanctions. Washington, for its part, said that it was not satisfied with Pyongyang's denuclearization efforts. In recent weeks, Pyongyang testified a rocket engine. Kim took 2 horse rides up the highly symbolic Mount Baek-2, and North Korean officials promised to deliver the US a Christmas present if it did not comply with its demands. After US's withdrawal from Iran nuclear deal in 2015, tensions between the two nations skyrocketed in 2019 as the US maximum pressure campaign took effect and Tehran lashed out against the harsh US sanctions. In March, the US designated the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps a terrorist group. In response, Tehran re-upped its nuclear program and began seizing commercial vessels in key shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf. In June, Iran was accused of shooting down a US military drone, nearly leading to a retaliatory US airstrike. Then an attack on key Saudi oil facility in September was again blamed on Iran. Tensions between US and Tehran, as a result, continue to rise. Venezuela's Russian-backed leader Nicolas Maduro clung to power this year despite an economic collapse, nationwide blackouts and fierce opposition from Juan Guaido, who declared himself Venezuela's interim president in January with support from the West. Tensions threatened to boil over in May when Guaido tried and failed to ignite an uprising. The attempted coup was seen as an embarrassing failure by the US and particularly National Security Advisor John Bolton, reportedly the architect of multiple attempts to unseat Maduro. In addition to harsh sanctions, the US went so far as to draw up military options but never took any action. Under Donald Trump, this was a year of seemingly never-ending trade wars between the US and China, the US and Europe, the US and random other countries for random reasons. It's also been a culminating year for Donald Trump administration's animus against the global trading system itself. Through 2019, representatives of US and China held multiple rounds of trade talks, but all that was happening was months of tit-for-tat tariff increases. However, the end of the year saw announcement that the two nations have reached a Phase 1 agreement to start de-escalating their trade war. But there are fears that the trade war could get hot again. Besides, the trade war has exacted a heavy cost on the global economy. Also, experts say that the biggest loser in US-China trade war has been WTO, as Trump is cementing a return to pre-WTO era where America achieves its objectives by threatening and imposing penalties on its partners rather than pursuing mutually beneficial trade liberalization at an arbiter like the WTO. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. The big news for Britain in 2019 was the confirmation that the country really is leaving the European Union. Voters made that choice in a referendum in 2016, but in the past 3 years, politicians argued continually about whether the country should rerun the vote or decide to nominally leave the European Union but continue to apply its rules and regulations. The victory of Boris Johnson's Conservative Party finally settled the principle of what happens. So let us recap what twists and turns were seen in 2019 in UK's Brexit journey. It all started in 2016, on 23rd of June that year, when British people in a public vote or referendum decided to leave the European Union. Since that date, Britain has been haggling over how to withdraw, the process known as Brexit.
And in accordance with the wishes of the British people, the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union.
Brexit was originally due to happen on 29th of March 2019, but the lawmakers have been squabbling, unable to reach a consensus over the terms of divorce. The battle has cost one Prime Minister, Theresa May, her job. Under May, the deadline was delayed twice after MPs rejected her Brexit deal, eventually pushing it to 31st of October 2019. As a result, May announced in late May that she would resign after failing to come up with a plan that satisfied her party, her coalition partners and officials in Brussels.
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
The task then fell to May's successor, Boris Johnson. The Conservative Party chose Johnson, a brash proponent of the withdrawal, to succeed May and take control of the Brexit process. Johnson took over as Prime Minister in July 2019 and set about renegotiating May's deal.
I will take personal responsibility for the change I want to see. Never mind the backstop. The buck stops here.
But going was not easy for him as well. Despite negotiating a revised deal, Johnson missed the October 2019 deadline. The EU then agreed a further extension till 31st of January 2020. In the end, Johnson got his agreement. On 17th of October, the Prime Minister and European Union negotiators announced that they had struck a draft deal, though it needs to clear several hurdles. When Britons went to the polls on 12th of December for parliamentary elections, Brexit was still overshadowing every other issue. Johnson's Conservative Party scored an overwhelming victory, and Britain's departure from the bloc now appears closer than ever. On 20th of December 2019, MPs voted in favour of Johnson's withdrawal agreement, which now goes on to further scrutiny in Parliament. Assuming the European Parliament also gives the green light, the UK will formally leave the European Union on 31st of January with a withdrawal deal.
With this mandate and this majority, we will at last be able to do what? You've been paying attention. Because this election means that getting Brexit done is now the irrefutable, irresistible, unarguable decision of the British people.
Following its departure, the UK will enter a transition period until 31st of December 2020. During this period, the UK's trading relationship with the EU will remain the same, while the two sides negotiate a free trade deal. If a trade deal is ready in time, the UK's new relationship with the EU can begin immediately after the transition. If not, the UK faces the prospect of having to trade with no agreement in force. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. 2019 will be remembered as the year of global outrage. Demonstrations around the world, both peaceful and violent, were set off by social unrest over economic instability, government corruption, inequality, and also climate change. From Hong Kong to France to Bolivia, here are some of the demonstrations that rocked the world in 2019. 2019 saw unrest in Hong Kong getting stronger and more violent. The protests this year were sparked in June by a bill to allow extraditions to mainland China, but they morphed into a popular revolt against Beijing's rule. The extradition bill was eventually scrapped, but the government refused any further concessions. The year saw protesters getting shot, dying and hurt during the demonstrations. There were colleges and universities being the center of demonstrations. Christmas Day also saw violent protests. Among the demands being made by protesters is an inquiry into the police, an amnesty for more than 6,000 people arrested, and the right to elect Hong Kong's leader. China denies interfering and says it is committed to the one country, two systems formula and has blamed foreign forces for fomenting unrest. It has been 2 years since Catalonia's then government tried to stage a breakaway from Spain, and riot police clamped down on an illegal independence referendum. In October this year, the tempers frayed again after the Spanish Supreme Court handed down stiff jail sentences to some of the leaders of that effort. The result was a wave of outrage that pulsed through Catalan cities during a week of rioting. As acting Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez tries to piece together a new government after elections in November, the Catalan question remains at the heart of Spain's fractured politics, sharpening animosities and polarizing public opinion. The latter half of the year also saw widespread protests in France. Nationwide industrial action is taking place since 5th of December against President Emmanuel Macron's planned overhaul of the pension system. The strike disrupting railways and roads shut some schools and brought more than 500,000 people onto the streets. Unions oppose Macron's plan to streamline France's state pension system and to push people to work until 64, beyond the legal retirement age of 62. Unions rejected calls for a Christmas truce, and negotiations over the pension reform are due to resume in January next year. In 2019, Lebanon revolted against economic crisis. The country in the Middle East has been dealing with its worst economic crisis in decades, and almost a third of people live under the poverty line. In October, the value of the Lebanese pound fell, and new taxes on tobacco, petrol and voice calls on apps like WhatsApp prompted protests. Prime Minister Saad Hariri resigned, but the protests continued, with violent clashes taking place well into December. In South America, it was Bolivia that gained attention due to political unrest. At least 32 people were killed in violence that erupted after a disputed election on 20th of October, with protesters' blockades causing severe fuel and food shortages in La Paz and other cities. The protesters alleged fraud, claiming that election was rigged. Organization of American States also reported that Bolivia's election was rigged in favor of Evo Morales. Morales resigned and left to seek refuge in Argentina. Nearly 2 months of protests over inequality rocked another South American nation, Chile, as the crisis started over a hike in public transport fares and left at least 26 dead and thousands injured. The protests then grew to take on wider grievances over living costs and inequality, culminating in 1 million people marching in Santiago. The United Nations has condemned the police and military response. Chilean lawmakers earlier rejected a bid to oust President Sebastián Piñera over allegations that he failed to safeguard human rights during weeks of deadly riots. Chile's Congress last week gave the green light to a referendum on changing the country's constitution next year, which was a central demand of the protesters. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. 2019 will also be remembered as the year when the public woke up to the climate crisis. Indeed, global warming was high on agenda in 2019. As effects of climate change became more and more pronounced, climate strikes took place across the globe. Activists urging world leaders to do more to combat climate change. And history was made by the vision of one young person in particular, 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, as millions of people across the planet joined her in 2019. Most areas of the world felt the harsh reality of the climate crisis in 2019. Toxic smog shrouded Asian megacities. Hundreds died in flooding and landslides. Cyclones battered coastlines. Droughts and deadly heat waves led to towns and cities running almost out of water. There were record flooding in Europe and Africa, and a heat wave of all things in Greenland. Climate change and its effects accelerating. There were devastating fires in Amazon rainforests and bushfires at the end of the year in Australia.
The reality of climate change is upon us. Droughts are getting longer and more severe. Heat waves are becoming longer and more severe. Our bushfire season is creeping into spring and winter. We are living in a dangerous climate.
But 2019 will be remembered as the year when public woke up to climate crisis. After years of languishing outside the mainstream, climate activism finally broke through in 2019. Climate protests acquired a new urgency this year, and it was the younger generation that took the movement in their hands. 16-year-old climate activist Greta Thunberg became the face of the movement. The movement that she started in August 2018, Fridays for Future, inspiring students globally to hold their own climate strikes, spread all around the world in 2019.
I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Students from UK, Australia, Switzerland, Germany, Japan and many other countries around the world joined the movement. They skipped school because they felt there was no point to school without a future. More than 9.6 million strikers in 261 countries participated in climate strikes. This as Thunberg visited the United Nations in New York, urging people in power to do more to combat climate change. Understandably, Thunberg became the youngest individual ever to be named Time's Person of the Year.
We are, after all, just children. You don't have to listen to us. But you do have to listen to the united science, the scientists. And that is all we ask. Just unite behind the science.
The end of the year saw COP25 Climate Summit, where delegations from nearly 200 countries took part. Delegations reached an agreement on stepping up the global response to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. However, there was no agreement on the regulation of carbon markets. Despite COP25's mixed results, there were plenty of signs of flourishing grassroots activity against climate change around the two-week conference in Madrid.
Civil society has been shut out of this COP. Our lives, children and future generations are in your hands, and you are failing us. Do you want to be remembered as the ones who had the chance to act, but decided not to, as betrayers of our generation, of indigenous people, and of communities desperately fighting on the ground? We are rising, we are fighting, and we will win. COPs have failed people and the planet. People power, climate justice, now.
With the school students and the youth steering the climate strikes, rejecting adult inaction and demanding more from the governments, in the coming years, we can expect the climate movement to keep growing. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Year 2019 also saw tragedies. There were natural calamities, many of them blamed on climate change, and many human-caused disasters and accidents that led to the loss of lives and destruction. Here are the events that made us cry in 2019. Floods wreaked havoc in many countries and submerged many cities in 2019. In Pakistan, floods, more than 150 people died. Floods also affected Iran, where 25 of country's 31 provinces suffered. Like every year, floods hit many cities in China. But it was flooding in Italy that grabbed maximum attention. Visuals showing beautiful city of Venice completely submerged broke many hearts. Flooding affected structures that are included in the UNESCO World Heritage. A state of emergency was declared. There were also tragedies in 2019 due to fire. Reports say the incidences of forest fire increased by 85% this year compared to 2018. Forest fires were reported in Indonesia, Australia, California and the US. The 2019 Amazon rainforest wildfire season saw a year-to-year surge in fires within Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay and Peru. The Amazon forest fires issue became politicized but also drew attention of the world towards effects of climate change. In the latter half of the year, Australia bushfires also caused much devastation. On 9th of December, a volcanic eruption in New Zealand's White Island led to the death of 17 people, many of them tourists. The active volcano off the east coast of the country's North Island had become a popular tourist destination in recent years. 2019 has been the second most active year on record in terms of the number of storms. The deadliest tropical cyclone of the year was Cyclone Idai in the southwest Indian Ocean, which killed over 1,300 people in Mozambique, Malawi, Zimbabwe and Madagascar. And the costliest tropical cyclone of the year was Typhoon Hagibis in the western Pacific Ocean, which caused more than $15 billion in damages after striking Japan. It killed 90 people. The Arabian Sea also saw the formation of 4 cyclones in 2019, a phenomenon recorded after 117 years. This year, the sea that touches the Indian subcontinent, West Asia and West Africa has seen the formation of Vayu, Hika, Kyar and Maha cyclones. Tremors of earthquake caused devastation in many parts of the world this year. In the month of June, in Sichuan, China, earthquake struck twice, killing 13. In September, a shallow earthquake near Mirpur struck northeastern Pakistan, leaving 19 dead and 300 injured. In November, northwestern Albania was struck by a strong 6.4 magnitude earthquake. A total of 52 people were killed and about 3,000 injured. Besides the natural disasters, many of them blamed on human activities leading to climate change, there were tragedies that broke our heart. In April, fire broke out beneath the roof of the iconic Notre Dame de Paris Cathedral in Paris. The fire destroyed the building's spire and most of its roof, and its upper walls severely damaged. Many works of art and religious relics suffered smoke damage. A complete restoration could require 20 years or more. The year 2019 also saw another accident involving Boeing 737 MAX passenger airliner. It was on 10th of March this year that Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed, killing all 157 people on board. This was 5 months after Lion Air Flight 610 crash in October last year, which killed all 189 on board. Aviation authorities around the world grounded the Boeing 737 MAX, causing massive financial damage to the US airliner and affecting American economy. March of 2019 also witnessed 2 consecutive terrorist shooting attacks at mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand during Friday prayers. The gunmen live-streamed the first attack on Facebook. The attacks killed 51 people and injured 49. The attacks led to increased attention on several issues facing our world today: white supremacism, social media regulation, and gun laws. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. While there were tragedies, there were a lot of amazing moments in 2019 that put a smile on our faces. The times that made us hope, believe in the beauty of the world. Forgive me for I have been a little biased in choosing some moments that are a tribute and celebration of women. Being a woman myself, it was a bit obvious, isn't it? So here are some lovely moments of 2019. 2019 is the year when black women reigned at beauty pageants. Miss Universe 2019 was Zozibini Tunzi from South Africa. Then Jamaica's Tonian Singh was named Miss World 2019. Also, this year's titles of Miss Teen USA, Miss America are currently held by black women. NASA astronauts Christina Koch and Jessica Meir made history on 18th of October when they performed the first all-female spacewalk. Although women have been doing spacewalks since 1984, this was the first time that 2 women conducted a spacewalk together. The internet was delighted this year to see visuals of Trevor Mallard, Speaker of New Zealand's Parliament, cradling a lawmaker's baby as he presided over a debate in the House of Representatives. The year 2019 also gave us the highest grossing film of all time, Avengers Endgame. Acting as the climax of 11 years and 22 films, the Russo brothers' extravaganza took $2.8 billion at the worldwide box office, to jostle James Cameron's Avatar from its position as the biggest hit of all time. Heartwarming visuals also came in from Iran, where thousands of Iranian women watched football match for the first time. More than 3,000 Iranian women crammed into a special section of a Tehran stadium to watch a World Cup qualifier against Cambodia, after they were allowed to buy match tickets for the first time in 4 decades. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And with those smiling moments, I wrap up this special year-end episode of World Panorama. Here is wishing all of you a very happy new year from the entire team of RSTV. And I'll meet you again in 2020 with the promise of keeping you updated with all the big international stories through this program. See you then in 2020. Bye-bye for now.